So as you settle in with eyes closed, sound might become more prominent. Often that spatial awareness becomes more prominent. We just start to feel what's happening around us. The slight movements. This is just kind of the nervous system taking it in as we settle into being in a receptive mode, which is what meditation really is on a deep level. And as we settle into this practice, we work with that reflexive piece of the nervous system that kind of always has a little bit of vigilance. It's its job, so it's all good. We can help that settling process along with those deep breaths. Just taking a long inhale in, maybe even holding it at the top of the breath for a couple of seconds, and then slowly releasing. And just feeling into the body. You might be carrying some places of tension in the body this morning. Also, really just a natural part of being alive. This body is continually responding to internal and external stimulus. Maybe you slept a little wonky. Maybe there's tightness in the neck or shoulders. So, with this natural rhythm of the breath, you might just consciously let go, relax a bit, letting the shoulders drop down, just softening the muscles in the forehead, around the eyes, the jaw, and the neck. And just letting the arms kind of relax in the lap or wherever you're sitting, if you're at home. And just feeling into the hands. It's this feeling of aliveness. And as the breath kind of moves naturally, you can be kind of a curious witness to the body breathing in and out. And as the body begins to settle a bit, can turn our attention to the mind and the heart. So just noticing the mind and what we call the mental activity, thoughts coming and going. And have a curious, kind of observational stance with thinking as well. And just as we may bring to this moment, to class this morning, some tension in the body, we also are always kind of bringing in qualities of the heart, emotional layers of experience. Our emotions are always moving through in response to internal thoughts and physical physical situations in the body, sensations, and sometimes illness, discomfort, and also the external circumstances in your family, community, country, the world. So as the system, mind, body, heart system settles a bit, you might just notice what you're bringing here this morning. Just an openness and a friendliness toward whatever arises. Sometimes helpful if there's a strong emotion present to just put a hand on the heart or a hand on your own arm, just as a kind of way of acknowledging what's here and that we're attending to that, just acknowledging. So this practice of meditation doesn't have the goal of fixing anything or trying to feel a certain way or not feel a certain way. It's about kind of getting in touch with the truth of how things are right now. So we'll sit in silence for the rest of our practice this morning with just this simple instruction of noticing what's arising in terms of thoughts, body sensations, emotions, and holding it with an open friendliness, compassion. anchoring the attention on the movement of the breath or the sensation of the hands in the lap, the feet on the floor. And just returning again and again to the truth of this moment. So just gently noticing where the attention is in this moment. And if necessary, kind of coming back to the breath, just rejoining the movement of the breath. It's always available. You might relax throughout the body. As we close our meditation this morning, just pausing for a moment to take in the kind of collective energy in the room, if you're here in person or on the screen, kind of combining these two. The intention that it took to be here this morning. So in our tradition, we dedicate the merit of our practice to all beings. You can specifically dedicate the merit of your practice to an individual or group, but in our class, we like to just kind of widen that perspective a bit. When we talk about the merit of practice, we're referring to beginning with the intention to come and sit. Has nothing to do with how many times your mind might have wandered or what kinds of thoughts or judgments might have come up. We're really tapping into the intention to be here, to wake up, to see things more clearly, to rest in loving kindness and compassion. So we gather our collective merit this morning and dedicate it to all beings. That includes ourself, all beings who might be suffering, who may be living in fear, experiencing anger, the difficult emotions, uncertainty, grief. And again, we might include ourselves in this blessing that we send out, knowing that all beings, including ourselves, want to be safe, free from harm, be healthy, to live in peace. And in the Buddhist tradition, there's an energy to the practice that's generated. So it's not wishful thinking that we send those messages of loving kindness out in the world. There's actually kind of a web of interconnectedness, of interbeing that is affected by our own intentions to wake up. So just kind of feeling that energy in the heart and feeling the connection with those around you and all around the world, this web of interbeing. All right. Thank you. All right. So coming back and taking a moment to stretch. You need to move around, get another blanket. Thank you for your practice today. And as I mentioned at the beginning of class, we are at the beginning of a series on the 5 spiritual powers. And I don't think we've done this series in this class before. So I'm going to be talking about faith today, the first of the 5 spiritual powers. The others are effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And so while we've certainly talked about each one of these topics over and over again, and they show up on different lists as well, but the way they're grouped in this teaching, the word powers is actually really important. So, and in the Buddhist tradition, there's a little bit of a different definition of power, what that means. So I hope you know by now, but that it's not power over something, all right, or the ability to influence other people, or to have any kind of control over anything. So sort of a different definition of power than in our mainstream society. But these are, I like to think of them as superpowers that the individual cultivates through the awareness of these really natural qualities that every human being has, and that they serve as a kind of protection for yourself and others in the world. So faith is considered, it comes first because it's sort of like it comes before mindfulness, which is interesting because on a lot of these lists, mindfulness comes first. But faith shows up first here because it's like the seed of everything else, the seed of the spiritual practice, so that the cultivation of those other factors can't really happen if there's not a faith in the practice itself. So this really kind of fundamental foundation that allows the rest of our practice to really bloom and to be authentic and heartfelt. So faith is kind of an energy. It's like a natural organic quality that I think we're born with it. It's like a trust. That's the other word that often comes to my mind when I think of faith in this tradition, because it's like a trust in things that we can't see, but we can experience. And that's one of the things that the Buddha really instructed us to do, was not to have, and we'll get into the different types of faith, but not to just have a blind faith because someone told you that this is a good idea, you'll feel better if you do this practice, okay? It's sort of, it comes from your internal experience of gaining an understanding of these things and then putting them into practical use in your own life and seeing what happens as a result. It's like this radical openness where this trust begins to become established. So faith is often translated as the offering of our hearts, the Pali word for faith. It's like it's a heart quality. And it implies a connection to the natural rhythm of life. So this is, again, when we compare it to our material lives, I don't know how else to say it. Like our lives, and when we're plugged into the external world and we're just living our, you know, our everyday kind of consumer-driven lives, we're not so tapped into this. But when we practice, and I don't just mean this I guess I should say, when we become aware that there's something else, there's a rhythm to how this life works. We might not understand it, but we're aware that it's there. And sometimes we get glimpses of it, and it's pretty cool. And then we start to feel more and more a part of something larger that we're a piece of. So it often, folks will say, it's like we're a wave in the ocean, like these distinct beings walking around and influencing things, but we're part of something much larger. And meditation practice and Buddhist practice in particular helps us to realize that, oh, there's not even really this solid sense of me and mine that's separate from everything else. And we start to realize that fundamentally, to feel into that more and more. The deeper our practice gets and the more wisdom arises as a result. So wisdom's another one of these superpowers that comes. But faith is first, because faith is saying, yes, I trust that I give myself over to the movement of life. That's kind of how I look at this quality of faith. I don't have to understand it, but I feel it. I know it's there. So the two kinds of faith that come up in Buddhist teachings are called bright faith and verified faith. And I've talked about these before. This is one of my favorite topics. So bright faith is described as a door being flung open and seeing something for the first time, like falling in love, or just all in. Something hits us and it's like, yes. And it's a really wonderful quality. And it's not a negative at all. It's something that really, it's a visceral feeling of being just overwhelmed by something. So there's great joy in it. And it's also considered very unstable and not prone to lasting. Yeah, I guess falling in love is not a bad example. Wow, everything's so green. You're so awesome. But there's other examples too that I think are more practical, actually. And it might even have involved you coming to the practice. Like there's something that drew everybody here to make, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can not only be spending a Sunday morning, but that you can find to express that spirituality within you. And sometimes it's we heard a teacher, and every word they said was like, how are they reading my mind? Most of us have had that experience. And it's like this bright faith arises. Oh, there must be something there. This is awesome. I'm going to get a meditation cushion. I'm going to, get the class, go to class every week. And then it kind of fades over time. But it's something to pay attention to, because those kinds of moments are, I don't know, I think they're always pointing us in the direction of something that deeply resonates. There's something about that person or that teaching or that environment. I mean, I've had these bright moments out in nature, like, oh, there's something here. I need to know everything about this, this feeling that I'm having. And so it's a positive thing for sure, as long as we don't cling to it and then we watch our stories that come after it. I'm going to go hiking every day. I'm coming back here all the time. It's always like my promise to myself, and then life intervenes. or we ascribe attributes to the person we fell in love with. You're so great story. And you know how that goes. So then taken that bright piece of inspiration, I guess that's another way of looking at bright faith, and we've put it to the test. We've examined it. We've tested it out for ourselves. Um, we've questioned our beliefs about the thing and the stories we're telling ourselves that we start to realize are, oh, we're maybe adding that on. And we start to get a real, it's like an unshakable kind of faith. And in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha is often talking, well, almost always talking about faith in the Dharma. And our definition of the Dharma is the truth of the way things are. It's just the nature of reality is the Dharma. Sometimes it's specifically defined as the Buddhist teachings, but there's a much broader intentional definition of Dharma, and it's the truth of the way things are. So the Buddha is always pointing back to that's the verified faith. You can have a spark of a teaching that says, ooh, I know that's true. And then the wisdom arises from an understanding of the truth of the way things are. And it's important to note that in the Buddhist tradition, there are very few fundamental truths. There's four, actually, right? These four noble truths. And they're not asking you to believe anything. The Buddha's saying this is the way it is if you pay attention, and not in a condescending way, right? But well, if you'd only pay attention, you'd believe what I'm telling you. It's that this world has got suffering in it. This is the nature of being human. There's ups and downs. That's the definition of that first noble truth. That this human life contains the lows. It's pervaded with suffering. And there's also the highs and the joys. But it's because people don't really realize, oh, suffering is a natural part of this human life. And that we suffer because we cling to things and we want things to be a certain way. And the fourth noble truth is that there's a release from that suffering. The third, sorry, and the fourth is these teachings that kind of the Eightfold Path. So it's sneaky to say there's only four, because then there's eight as part of the four. And then among those eight, there's 10 and 7 and 5. So anyway, yeah, but these are the fundamental truths of it's nature, these truths of nature and our minds as they intersect with the reality in the world. So anyway, as a result, we end up with this kind of unshakable faith in ourselves and our ability to be in this world. And doubt is an important aspect of faith in the Buddhist tradition. So doubt, it's important to bring up because it's not looked at as a negative. Doubt is essential in working with these teachings because you're supposed to be your own light in the world. You're supposed to be following your own intuition. And that grows the more you practice. You hone that, I often call it your inner compass. You're honing your ability through your interactions with the outside world and what's coming up for you internally. We start to get really good at noticing what's mine, what's not mine, how the way I think affects things, how the way I think and then act causes suffering for myself and others, the way I try to control things, and blah, blah. You know the drill. So to doubt is really important because that shows like where you might want to look a little bit more deeply or let something go for now and focus on the things that are drawing you into a more a greater sense of this interbeing, of this interconnectedness of all things, the mystery of life. And so over time, your views will start to shift. And just because it's such a practical thing, and I don't want to seem like, I don't know, I'm noticing as I'm talking that it's sort of like, well, if you just believe this, then that's not at all what everyone is so different and how they interface with this practice. So I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. Okay. Whose views have shifted since starting this practice? Views about the way the world works and your relationship to it. Whose views have shifted a little bit in response to this? Okay. So lots of hands are going up. And that, yes, thank you, Mark. So this is not, and I bet if we asked everyone whose hand was up, I won't ask you to do this. Maybe you can share if you want to. They're all going to be different. It's not like we all came to the same conclusion and the same way it plays out. It's like if one of the things that's shifted, like I can speak for myself, I'm just so much more compassionate and plugged into, it's very hard for me to be judgmental in the same way that I used to be. I can't say I'm always free of judgment, but there's just an understanding has grown about the suffering in the world and what other people are going through. And that the only thing that makes sense is kindness. And I might have thought that was like a platitude, I would have known that intellectually. Oh, the only thing that makes sense is kindness. I'm kind. Are you kind? I'm kind, but a deeply root, that's been a major shift for me. And I'm obviously still working on it. And I will have some outbursts every now and then, but just really it kind of fundamentally changed. So that we all might have a flavor of that, but everyone's going to have a different way that it manifests for them. And there's no right or wrong way. This is really not a prescriptive practice. It's all about you learning for yourself how these things unfold. And so it's faith in the practice. So we can think about all the different ways faith is expressed in our lives, but to bring it back to the Buddhist teaching specifically, it's faith in the Dharma and faith that if you persist in your practice with an earnestness, with an honesty, and with a kindness, a compassion toward yourself and the way that the things you notice, because remember, like a big part of this practice is being radically honest with ourselves about the attachments we have and the qualities that that we know are not helpful and that cause suffering. All of that. There's a lot of honesty involved in this practice, and that if we stick with it, we're going to be radically changed in a way that frees us from suffering. It's possible to be free from suffering in this lifetime. And it's not easy because we have to continue to come back again and again to these teachings. And so I've read this quote many times before. So maybe I'm sure you've heard it, but I'm going to read it again because it's just one of my favorite quotes from a retreat that I was on. It was a moment of bright faith for me. And it's from the teacher, Richard Shankman. And he said that, I think this was part of a meditation. So he said that the shifts in consciousness that happen as a result of meditation practice can seem infinitesimal or imperceptible if you try to track your day-to-day progress. But we can liken the trajectory of our lives to the trajectory of a large ocean tanker or container ship. Do you remember this one? The urge is there to plow full steam ahead in our lives, just like we've been doing for the last 30, 40, 50 years. There's a lot of momentum behind our habit patterns. Bringing conscious awareness to those patterns can be like trying to turn that tanker from south to east. It doesn't turn on a dime. But when we set a sincere intention to wake up, it's like turning the ship's wheel toward the east. And when we fire up the engines through the discipline of practice, then we let go and we have faith. If you're the captain of that ship and you turn the wheel and the engines are running, is there any chance that ship won't eventually turn? So that was a long quote, but you get the gist. You can't see the progress in this practice. That's what makes a lot of people leave after a couple classes or a couple times sitting on the cushion. And it makes me smile because it reminds me of, so we're talking about like faith is the seed, right? Because I used to do this and it would drive my grandmother crazy. We would plant vegetables in her garden. And I still love carrots, but I would always pull them out before they'd be this long. And I'd be like, where's the carrot? So checking on our day-to-day progress in meditation practice is like planting carrot seeds and then pulling them 3 days later to see what's happening. So that's the faith element of it, that we persist because there's a faith in the practice. There's a faith in the truth of the Dharma, of the way things are. And it is hard right now. I mean, I fully recognize that. Faith is difficult. So, I mean, if one of the things that we have faith in is that the world is a just place, or that good things happen to good people, or that there's a reward for doing the right thing, and that there's punishment for doing the wrong thing. And then we look day to day to see, is it working? Is it working? We're going to be really upset and say, well, forget it. There's no point in me believing in something just and good. And, our lives on this planet are pretty short, relatively speaking. So I don't know, maybe we could look at like the full length of our lives as the time it takes to grow a carrot. And maybe we're, just expecting that today, this year, in my lifetime, we're going to get it right and things are going to be just. And it's just not reality. And so we walk this line between fighting for justness, for justice, and accepting that people gonna people. Like, this is our collective world. And we are not the only ones who inhabit this space and, make the rules. But that's not our job. Our job is to hold steady with what we know is right and true, and to not give up. And the faith is that there's something else going on at the same time that we can't see. That, this arc of justice is long, and what, right? The arc of the moral universe is what's long, and it bends towards justice. And the end of the arc may not be in our lifetime, but that doesn't mean we give up. And yeah, and then in every person's life, there's going to be these moments, these challenges where it's like, ooh, how do I respond to this? And so the Buddhist tradition would say that we do not add suffering back into the world. So that, I don't know, I guess that's a little bit of an anchor. If we truly believe that the only thing that makes sense is kindness, ooh, are we being put to the test? Yeah. to everyone? Compassion to everyone? So yeah, just a recognition of that. I mean, did anyone join us for the weekend, the online weekend that I just did? A few of you? I didn't do it. I emceed the thing. It was a bunch of other teachers who did it. I was your host, but yeah, it was. Did you like it? Mm. Oh, can you, we'll let you talk about it now because I'm done. You just hold the button down for like 4 seconds and then we're going to turn the microphone on because Nancy had a comment. Just if you squeeze the top and the bottom, you'll hit the button and then a blue light's going to come on. Hold it down for like 4 seconds. Then give it a test and see if we can hear you.
Test, test.
Can you hear her? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing. And the timing was impeccable because when you just gave the analogy of the ship and turning, it's resources like that that you and the teachers provided that helped to fuel our fuel. So gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you don't know what we're talking about, we had Friday night, Saturday, all day Saturday and Sunday morning. I invited a bunch of teachers from all over, right, to come and talk to us about, we called it when the rubber hits the road, how to, I don't know, I gave it some title, about living the Dharma in difficult times or something like that. And they all kind of had different points of view. And we recorded the whole thing. So if you weren't able to be there, you will soon be able to access those. I have to figure this out. I've been really busy this past week, but I'm going to figure this out. And there'll be a way to access those by donation, like we do everything here at IMCW. It was really heartening. We had 1,014 people registered for it, all by donation. And it was really great. It allowed us to like give the teacher some dana and then continue. We'll do another thing like that. So yeah, I guess a plug for dana based things, but go ahead.
Yeah, I contributed some dana at the beginning. And then on Sunday, I contributed dana again.
Yeah,
So,
I've done that too. It's sort of like
yes.
after, wow, this was really valuable. Go back. Where's that dana button? Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's just kind of open it up now to, I don't know, your comments or questions at the end of our class. We have this time, reflections on the topic, or even just basic questions about meditation practice if you're relatively new. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn my volume back up. So if you're on Zoom and you have a comment or a question, just raise your yellow hand and I will see you. Right. Yes. Oh, hold on. Well, okay, we got 2 in the room. Thank you.
I just wanted to share, based on your comment about the practice changing your views. One of the things that I've experienced is that it's shed light on views I didn't know I had. And so sometimes I felt like the practice has helped me articulate things. And it's like by seeing that lens, I can peel it off and it gives me a little bit more expansive of view. And now that I've done that enough, I'm like, oh, I know there's 70,000 more layers that I haven't gotten insight into, but I know they're there. And that, it's like I recognize the unpeeling process will just take forever because if I had these views that I didn't even know I had, then I know there's more. Just wanted to
Well,
share that.
it's a plug for the Buddhist notion of reincarnation. You'll have other lives. So keep To continue to peel back the layers.
Yeah, don't get too yanked. You've got
No
all the
worries,
time in the
yeah.
world.
I think in the back.
So I was really excited to come to this class today because this has always been a very fraught topic for me. I just wanted to kind of share where I'm at with it with
Mhm.
everybody in case anybody is coming to it from my similar perspective. I've always had an aversion to faith, and it's an aversion that I've cultivated because when I was 14, I read a book called The End of Faith by Sam Harris, who, funnily enough, has a very popular meditation app. And I went down that rabbit hole of the new atheism, the four horsemen of atheism, and this rigid skepticism. And I cultivated this, I don't want to call it a talent, but I've gotten very good at poking holes in any teaching I hear, any argument I hear. And if I can find the hole to poke in whatever I hear, then a lot of times, or at least the way it used to be for me, then everything was invalid. For example, like, and this is not an indictment of you at all, but but it's just something that arises because of what have cultivated. When you said the thing about the ship turning east, and the quote said, I can't remember exactly how it is. Like, is there any chance that it won't turn east? My thought was, well, maybe it hits an iceberg. So if that's what I've cultivated. If I can find any gotcha, then I would throw it all out the window. But as I've practiced, and I really have cultivated this type of faith and confidence, I feel like I've realized that the words of any argument have nothing to do with the reality of, the way it is, I guess you would say, the truth of what we experience, and language is imperfect. So all of these rhetorical tricks in my head, really, they have nothing to do with what we experience. And that's how I have been able to cultivate this faith, is just by leaning into that direct experience. So that's my little story.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure there is lots of resonance with that. Yeah, this practice tends to draw skeptics and intellectuals. Like, and we love to use our intellect to do that, to find like the chink in the armor, like how can I get in there and then kind of dismantle this thing. And as you were talking, I've definitely had that reaction too. But the beautiful / really frustrating thing about these teachings are that there's nowhere to hide. You can do that. And then what happens? Because there's no judgment. Often when we're doing that, we're pushing against something, and then there's a push back. And it's this kind of thing. But in these Buddhist teachings, if you push, no one pushes back. And then there you are. Oh, it's me, myself, and I, none of which exist, right? Like, it's oh, we come face to face with our own belief about things. And if we're really earnestly practicing, we'll have and I mean, by earnest, I mean with curiosity. That's our definition of mindfulness. Like, we're not judging ourselves. We're like, isn't that interesting how I like to poke holes in things? Isn't that interesting how I like to feel superior because then I think I have control over things. If I can poke hole, I'm not talking, see, I'm not insulting you back, right? If I can poke a hole in it, that means I'm better than that. I know something no one else knows. Look at all those suckers, right? But there's no pushback in this practice. It's like, there you are with those beliefs. And how's that working for you, right? And then we bring reflection and compassion to that. And wisdom arises. This is why, anyone who sticks with this for any amount of time is very courageous. These really are superpowers because we're saying we're willing to look at all of that. And the only way to look at it is with a friendliness toward the human condition. It's not personal that we want to poke holes in things. It's a safety mechanism. We do that because we've been hurt by something. Like it's a protection, we think. And so the practice is continually asking us to, do you really look at that defense you've built up? How is that working in your life? Is it actually protecting you? Is it causing more suffering for yourself and others or less? And just look at it with a really kind of a friendliness, not a judge, not a judgment. And that helps us to let go of some of these defenses so that we can really start to feel into this interconnect. It takes away the separation, the sense of separation, because what you described is like a classic separation mechanism, right? And we all do it. And so it's kind of letting go of some of those safeties that we thought we needed. Maybe we did at one point, maybe we never needed them. Maybe we don't need them now. So thank you for sharing that, really important. Others. Okay, Melanie. Go ahead and unmute.
I just wanted to say that really resonated with me because I didn't read Sam Harris, but I am also a proud skeptic. So probably heavily because of unfortunate encounters with pretty destructive blind faith. I've one of the things I've tried to distinguish that's made me more comfortable with the idea of faith in the Buddhist perspective is faith, not hope. I'm still very uncomfortable with the concept of the arc of the moral universe because I don't want to put my toes into hope or outcomes. I feel like it's enough to know that kindness is all that matters. If I start worrying about where it's going, it's gonna throw me off. And I'm thinking at some point that may be I think that's where I am now and where I've been for a long time, and maybe for this entire lifetime. But
We just lost your sound.
oh,
there you go. We can hear you again.
I just have found with a lot of the teachings, if I can just put aside that and think, well, this isn't where my practice is now, and work with what does feel like growth. Then, a few months or even a few years later, other teachings kind of click in and I see them from a slightly different perspective. And I think, oh, it's not the thing I was arguing against, actually. It's something more subtle. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there and just great thank you to the person who spoke because boy, did that resonate.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And you brought up a good point too about hope being another way of like attaching to expectations
Mhm.
that we're gonna see, like, uh, that's a no-no in this practice, right? Like, that's not, no. That, because then it be our goodness, the goodness we're putting in the world becomes a tit for tat. And it might even be unconscious. Well, I'll be kind to everyone, but I am expecting to see some kindness in return, or for someone to change their behavior. And that's not our business, what other people do in response to what we do. So we have no control over the way other people respond to things and the decisions other people make and all of that stuff. But that's the faith again. It is different than hope. Because there's a letting go quality to faith, and hope feels like we're attached to an outcome in some ways. So I don't know. I wouldn't say don't have any hope. Hope is lost, but it's different. It's a little bit of a different definition. It takes like the long view, like the deep time long view, that this is not all there is. There's a faith in that, and I am just contributing the energy I'm putting back into the world will be love. That's kind of the fundamental nature of it. So thank you, Melanie. Yeah, skepticism's fine. Totally fine. As long as you're mindful of it, you will grow. Growth continues with skepticism. Yeah, that's the doubt piece. Anyone else? In the back there. Hold on just one second.
Thank you. Just a question to follow on from the last comment and your comment after that. Why do you use the word hope? Does that come from the Buddhist tradition, or is that something of your interpretation? I'm curious because hope implies, I think as was said, some expectation. And in fact, you gave the Martin Luther King quote about the arc of, the arc bending towards justice. And that actually implies quite a specific outcome, even though it could be over a long time. Now, is it in Buddhism that's kind of, obviously they don't quote Martin Luther King, but is it in Buddhism that there's this idea that things are somehow in our conception have to improve? Or is that just some interpretation of that? Or I'm curious because it would seem to me that faith is that you don't need to be concerned with whether things improve or not.
Right.
You have faith in the life we don't understand, the life we experience, the things we feel. Could be the human race will finish in 5 years and there'll be other things in life and the universe. So why is it necessary to, and it's not a criticism and a skepticism, it's a question about why it would be interpreted in that way and why you brought that aspect up. I'm quite curious. Thank you.
Thank you, I think. I'm like, wait, how did I get this job?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that.
No. It's a great question. So they are a bit separate, the Martin Luther King quote and then the Buddhist view of reality. They are separate. I mean, Martin Luther King, he did quote Buddha a lot. We're kind of, there's some intersections there that might just be serendipity. And Martin Luther King was really speaking to the people practically and from a different tradition. And I think he used the word hope a lot. So where I would say, like when I think of the arc of the moral universe, it's like way past my lifetime. And it almost like it just goes out into the universe. And then there's this faith. And then I guess, what is the definition of justice? That's the word that would not probably show up in the Buddhist teachings, because that has to be someone's opinion of what is just. Okay, so that's why like the Martin Luther King's lifetime was dedicated to racial and social justice, right? So that's kind of where that comes from. And yeah, in the Buddhist teachings, it's not, nothing's in the future. It's not going to get better in the future. It's okay right now. We have to be able to see that, I mean, and this is where I want to, a part of me wants to crawl under my desk and be like, who wants to teach the class now? Because it's hard to describe, but it's a faith that we're co-creating this world that as we see it and the world that we live in, and that there is actually not separation. And the faith piece comes because we're in these physical bodies that have so many limitations and these brains that have limitations. And when we do this practice, we're tapping into something larger. And we're trying to take that wisdom that's coming in and coming up and put it into practice in this broken world. So even to like that, to use the phrase, everything's fine the way it is, and then the broken world, like, do you see how there's a lot of paradox throughout this? Because we live in this reality with all the crap that's going on right now that is, you know, objectively disturbing to a lot of people and affecting a lot of people's everyday practical lives. We can't really escape that because this is the life of a human being. So it's like the heavy lift of this practice is to ask us to not deny that. We're not turning away from that reality and saying everything's fine. It's just unfolding as it should, as, you know, people are being actively harmed. It's saying, I recognize the suffering in the world, that first noble truth. Yeah, this is the way it is. And that I'm going to keep tapping into this sense of interconnectedness, that I'm going to start feeling more than just believing is true. I will see it in the face of my neighbor who didn't vote the way I voted. If I interact with them, I'll be able to see the humanity and the whole history of the beliefs of this person that make them act in the world differently than I act. But then I'll watch my judgments about how I might make them out to be a terrible person and all, you know. Yeah, it's a wonderful practice to look at every human being and every being as a Buddha. I see the Buddha nature in you. And that's a faith element as well. It doesn't mean if I acknowledge that you have Buddha nature, you better start acting like it. You know, you better make different decisions in the future. It's don't know. It's this unknown, but I will put this goodness back into the world as I see it. So we can only put back into the world what we understand. And everyone's at vastly different levels of understanding. This is not a judgment. This is just like the reality of the world is that people are at different levels of awakening, which is a word I hesitate to use sometimes because again, I don't mean it to be like, well, I'm more awake than you are. You know, that's not it at all. It's just it's a compassionate understanding that the conditions in people's lives, the things people are born into and the things that happen to them are the causes that make them act the way they do, including us and some of the dumb things we do. And can we have compassion for the whole thing and then continue to work for the things we think are right? So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think it does, because I think it actually might be more a hope in the projects that we embark on because of our faith and reflection or whatever wisdom we have from, you know, studying these traditions and practicing, that maybe that allows us, we should be hopeful, should be in the things we do as projects will in fact improve what we consider justice in our perception, right, in the short life we have, right? So perhaps.
Yeah, not just hopeful, like joyful. Isn't that like, doesn't that seem like, how is that possible? But if we're the like, it's so hard to like put this in a like the right language. I'm just like, if we're like the messengers for slowly waking up to the reality of the way things are, right? Everyone's a messenger, right? But if we're dour and angry and, you know, complaining all the time about how things are, like that's not a true representation of faith. And so how to tap into that, the energy of the practice. We're going to talk more about this in these 5 spiritual powers in future classes, but there's a joyfulness to this waking up to the way things are, and an ease that comes in. It doesn't mean it feels joyous and easy every moment, but to know that that's part of this. This is not a practice for, you know, to feel aggrieved all the time or superior or upset or all of that. It's the fruit of this practice is actually equanimity, and joy. Joy is infused into this equanimity. So maybe we'll bookmark it there as a teaser to say, come back next week as we continue this exploration of the 5 spiritual powers. So, all right, everyone. I'm going to need a nap after this. These are, I'll listen to this recording and be like, why did you say it that way? And I appreciate your my humanity is part of everything we're doing here. So I'm just like you exploring these things. So I'm always happy to get these questions because it makes me think. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye, everyone.